let's try to ping across a different VLAN and see what happens, okay? For instance, let's try to ping, let's have sales 1 PC try to ping engineering 1 PC and see what happens, okay? Sales PC 1 ping 10.10.10.11. So sales PC 1 over here. Let me move this so you can see. Sales PC 1. Let's see if it's able to communicate with engineering PC in a different VLAN, okay? See, it's failed already. The request timed out. Okay. Obviously, it's not going to be able to ping because, like we said, VLANs segregate the LAN into separate, manageable, smaller domains, and devices, end host devices, are not going to be able to communicate if they're in different VLANs. Okay. Obviously, you want to put the right end host in the right VLAN so that this issue does not happen. Okay. If you need to have end host devices communicate with each other, but they're in different VLANs, that's where you're going to have either a router. You're going to need to have a router or a layer 3 switch to be able to send that traffic across the different VLANs. Okay. The next section, we're going to talk about the 3 ways to route the traffic between different VLANs. As you can see now, we have the router here between configured, not yet configured, but it's on the network. Let's go to the command level, enable interface config. Let's go to the global configuration. Let's configure the interface 0/0 here on the router. There are 3 ways to do this, okay? The first way to do the routing between VLANs, the first way is to have separate interfaces on a router, okay? The second way is to have a router on a stick, okay? And the third is to have the layer 3 switch do the routing and not have a router, okay? So the 3 ways. The first one is having separate interfaces on a router. Second way is a router on a stick. And then the third is having a layer 3 switch do the routing itself. The first way, let's try the first way, okay? With separate interfaces on a router. Okay, global config, interface, fast Ethernet, fast Ethernet, fast Ethernet 0/0. IP address. So we have been given these 2 gateway IP addresses. Okay. And another thing I forgot to mention is all these IP addresses we have here, they're all in one thing I forgot to mention is all these IP addresses we have in this lab demo, they're all submask /24, okay? So the IP address back to the router configuration. So IP address 10.10 10.10 submask 255.255.0 no shutdown. Routers shutdown interfaces by default, so you have to specify and say no shutdown. Okay, so incorrect IP address, there's a typo. Okay, so guys, that's how you set up VLANs on a network. Next, we're going to see how to set up the configurations so that end hosts in different VLANs can communicate. So in the next video, we're going to talk about the inter-VLAN routing. Okay, see you in the next video. Welcome back, guys. Like we said in the previous video, here we're going to discuss how we do inter-VLAN routing. Like we said earlier, there's 3 ways to do this. Okay, the first way is to set up interfaces on the router 1 right here. Set up different interfaces, and then the second way is to have the router on a stick, and then the third way is to remove the router out of the network and use layer 3 switch and have layer 3 switch route traffic to and from different VLANs. Okay, the first way, separate interfaces on a router. Here we go. Let's open the router. Enable config host name router 1. Just setting router, changing router name from default router to R1. Okay. Next, on the interface, fast Ethernet 0/0. Hopefully you can see that 0/0 right here. We're going to set the default IP address for every one of those 2 VLANs we have. The engineering VLAN IP gateway IP address is 10.10.10.10/24. One thing I forgot to mention, guys, the subnet mask that we used on all of these IP addresses here is /24. Okay, /24. So Eng is going to use 10.10.10.10 as the default IP. Sales gateway IP is 10.10.20.10. Okay, let's configure these two on the router, on these two interfaces. We're going to configure Eng on 0/0, and then we're going to configure sales IP default IP, the gateway IP address to the interface 0/1. Okay, starting with Eng VLAN interface fast is 0/0 IP address 10.10.10.10 space the mask no shutdown. The reason we do this is because routers shut down interface by default, so you have to specify and say no shutdown. Okay, now you can see it's up, it turned to green, it's up. So we're going to do the same on the other interface facing the router, and we're going to configure the sales gateway IP address. Okay, interface fast Ethernet 0/1 IP address 10.10.20. If you hit the upper arrow, it's going to bring up your most recent command you entered. Okay, so we were at 10.10.20.10 space 255.255.255.0, the subnet mask. No shutdown. Okay, boom, it's up as well, as you can see here. Okay, now because we have to configure the switch here, switch 2. We have to configure the ports on switch 2 right here, these two ports from to and from the router. We have to configure them as access ports. Okay, switch ports. Let's do that as well. Switch 2, enable config T, back to global configuration, interface fast Ethernet. Let's see, what number was the interface? Fast Ethernet 0/1 is for Eng, and then 0/2 is for sales. Okay, so interface fast 0/1. We configure that as a switch port mode access and switch port access VLAN 10 for engineering. Okay, and then interface VLAN 0/2, the other port right here, 0/2 facing the router, is going to be configured for VLAN 20, which is the sales VLAN mode access switch port. You don't have to type the whole word switch port. You can cut it off right here. The switch. It's also recognizable. So switch access VLAN 20. That's done. Now let's verify and see if now if the sales PCs will be able to communicate with engineering PCs, okay, across the network. So sales PC, sales one, which is this right here at the very bottom right hand side, okay, office 2. Let's see if it will be able to communicate with. Let's see if this should be able to communicate with engineering PC 1. But let's see if it does. Now, ping 10.10.10.11, the moment of truth. There we go, guys. As you can see, the first ping failed because the ARP, the address resolution protocol, was still updating, okay? And then the next 3 pings, they were successful. If you ping again, you can see it's 100% successful, 0% lost. Awesome, guys. That's how you configure the inter-routing, inter-VLAN routing using different interfaces on a switch, on a router. So we have configured these 2 interfaces here, one interface for the VLAN 10 and the other one for VLAN 20, which is sales. And we have configured the 2 ports on the switch to be able to send traffic up and down to the switch, to the router. And as you can see, sales PCs can ping now engineering PCs. So that's the first way you do it, okay? The second way you do this is using a router on a stick. How do you do that, okay? Let's remove interface fast Ethernet 8 0/1. Let's remove it. Let's see. Boom, it's gone, okay? Now, a router on a stick, it uses one cable. As you can see, we have only one cable going from the switch 2 to the router right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to split the same one cable into being able to use VLAN 10 when it's necessary and VLAN 20 when it's necessary. Only one cable going between the switch and the router. How do you do that? Okay. Let's go back onto the router. Okay. Back to the config level. Interface fast Ethernet 0/0. That's the only one we have left, 0/0. So the way you do the router on a stick is, as soon as you get into on that interface level, you do a no shutdown and no IP address. Okay, we're going to remove the IP address that we had earlier, so there's no IP address here. Okay, no IP address. And then next, we're going to split the interface fast Ethernet 0/0 into 2 sub interfaces. Okay, we created what this command did was take interface 0/0 and split it and create a sub interface .10. Okay, and now we're going to make sure it's set for the .1Q. Okay, encapsulation .Q1 .1Q 10 for engineering. Okay, boom, that's done. And let's do the same fast Ethernet 0/0 .20. That's the sub interface for the sales VLAN. Okay, it is created, and do the same encapsulation the 1Q20 encapsulation the 1Q20. Boom. No, you have to provide that spacing between the 1Q and 20. Okay, and then IP address 10.20.10 with subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Now we have the two sub interfaces configured, and the IP address is set up on those sub interfaces. Let's verify this. Show IP interface brief. Guys, that's how you check and verify the interface configuration. As you can see, we set up the VLAN IP address over there, but we forgot to set up the range IP address. Okay, let's go back. Config T interface fast 0/0 dot 10, and then encapsulation dot Q110 dot 1Q10, and then IP address 10.10.10.10 sub mask. Now we're good to go. Now if you check again, show IP interface brief, there we go. We have the range and the sales IP addresses set up. Oh, not again. We haven't set up. This is set up but on the wrong interface. We need to remove these and set it up on the sub interface we just created over there, 0/0.20. Okay, let's go back. Okay, config T interface fast 0/1, no IP address. So that removes the IP address here from that interface. Okay, now back into that sub interface for the sales VLAN. Okay, interface 0/0 the 20 encapsulation the 1Q20 IP address 10.10.20.10/24 sub mask. Now should be now set up properly. Okay, let's verify. There we go. We have the two IP addresses set up on the router, on the sub, the two sub interfaces configured with the two IP addresses, but on the same on the same physical interface, fast CCNA 0/0 on the router. Okay, that's how you do it. Next, we're going to configure the port. We're going to configure this fast Ethernet 0/1 port on switch number 2. You have to configure this to be able to process trunk traffic, because we're going to have the 2 VLANs coming in and out of this port. So it has to be able to support that, and that's the trunking. Okay, that's where trunking comes in. Okay, so back on switch 2, let's set up this as a trunk port. So interface fast Ethernet 0/1. Oops, local config interface fast 0/1 switch trunk encapsulation .1q. It's a typo. Encapsulation switch trunk encapsulation .1q switch mod trunk. Now we have configured this port to mod trunk to be able to handle the 2 VLAN traffics coming in and out of the router. Okay, perfect. Next, let's verify and see if an engineering PC can communicate with a sales PC across the network. Okay, let's check PC2 ping. So PC2 right here, let's see if it's able to communicate with sales PC2. Okay, so sales PC2 on the right hand side right here is at 10.10.20.12. The moment of truth. Let's see. It might take a while as the ARP gets updated. There we go. The first ping failed because ARP the address resolution protocol was being updated, but the next 3 were successful. Okay, let's do this again. Should come up 100%. There we go. It was 100% successful. Okay, awesome. So guys, that's how you do a router on a stick inter-VLAN routing. Okay, that is the option number 2. Now, the option number 3, the very last option that you have, and usually this is from what I hear is what's mostly in the real world. That's what people tend to do because it saves us from having to buy that extra equipment. Okay, because now the third option, you're not going to use or need this router right here. Let's go ahead and get rid of it. Okay, boom, it's gone. Deleted, it's gone. Now the router is gone, so the PC, Eng PC, should not be able to ping sales PC. Okay, should not be able to ping sales PC. This Eng PC right here. Let's see if it can ping this sales PC. Sales PC number 3 on this side. 10.10.20.13. You shouldn't be able to ping that. Shouldn't be able to ping that. See? First ping failed. The second one failed. the third one should fail, and the fourth one should fail too, because the router is no longer in the network to help with the inter-VLAN routing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use layer 3 switch right here in the middle. We're going to configure this to be able to facilitate this communication between the end host in different VLANs. Okay, there we go. So we go to the switch command level, command line interface. So we're going to enable the IP routing on the switch, because this is a layer 3 switch. Remember, this is a layer 3 switch, which has that capability to route between different VLANs. So IP routing, we're going to enable IP routing, and then we're going to configure the interfaces on this switch with their corresponding default IP addresses. Okay, so interface VLAN 10, give it address, we give it the gateway address 10.10.10.10 255.0. Okay, and then we do the same for the other VLAN. Interface VLAN 20. IP address 10.10.20.10. That's subnet mask. So we're basically setting up these two gateway IP addresses on the switch, okay? So that the switch knows how to handle a traffic that's supposed to go to another VLAN. If that happens, so the switch should be able to route the traffic to the proper gateway IP address. Okay, perfect. Next, let's see if that connectivity is now set up. I mean, between these different VLANs. Okay, back to sales PC. We're taking sales PC2 on the right hand side from Office 2. Let's try to ping engineering PC 2 right here. Okay, let's try to ping this engineering PC on the left hand side. So 10.10.10.12. The first ping might time out because ARP is updating. Okay, that's what we expected. First one failed, second one failed. See, guys, perfect. Look at that. The last two pings were successful, and the first two failed because the ARP address resolution protocol was updating. Okay, now if you try that again, it should come up 100%. Okay, look at that, very successful, guys. That's how you do it. Those are the three ways to route the traffic between different VLANs. To recap, the first way is to set up different interfaces on a router, and have your switch uplink your traffic through the router for the router to make that decision where to forward that traffic. And then the second option is to have a router on a stick, and with a router on a stick, you have a single cable going from the switch to the router, and you have one interface on the router where it is split up into various sub interfaces. On those sub interfaces is where you're going to configure your VLAN configurations, okay? And that's the second option, the router on the stick. And the third option, which is more practical in the real world from what I hear from other engineers, is using a layer 3 switch and configuring IP routing on that switch, and so that the router can route the traffic to different VLANs. Okay. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.